The gavel struck 3 times, and Duke Alistair Vane knew his life was over. Not from a blade, not from poison, but from words, calculated, vicious, and wrapped in the language of justice. They called him a butcher, a war criminal, a man who'd signed death warrants not for duty, but for gold. And the worst part? Half the kingdom believed it. Tonight, you're going to hear how a decorated war hero became the most hated man in the realm, and how one woman's refusal to look away tore apart a conspiracy that reached the throne itself. Stay until the end. Hit that like button. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Because this is just the beginning. The hearing chamber smelled like old wood and older grudges. Alistair sat alone at the defendant's table, his spine straight, jaw set, hands folded on the scarred oak surface. He'd worn his formal uniform, the one with the Vane crest stitched in silver thread over his heart. It felt like armor now, or maybe a target. Around him, the gallery buzzed. Nobles in silk, merchants in wool, reporters with ink-stained fingers scribbling notes before anything had even been said. They weren't here for truth. They were here for blood. His blood. All rise for the High Council of Inquest. Alistair stood. The chains weren't on his wrists, not yet, but they might as well have been. Every eye in the room tracked him like he was something dangerous that had slipped its leash. The council filed in. 5 of them. Lord Pembroke at the center, ancient and sharp-eyed, draped in the red robes of judicial authority. Flanking him were Lady Ashford, Lord Greaves, Magistrate Renwick, and Constable Thorne. All of them had voted to bring him here. All of them had already made up their minds. Pembroke's gavel cracked again. "Be seated." The room obeyed. "Duke Alistair Edward Vane," Pembroke began, his voice dry as parchment. "You stand accused of authorizing unlawful executions during the border campaigns. Executions carried out not in defense of the realm, but for personal enrichment. Executions that violated the King's Accord and the laws of war. How do you answer these charges?" Alistair didn't flinch. "Not guilty." A ripple of whispers spread through the gallery. Pembroke's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "We shall see." The prosecution wasted no time. Their lead counsel was a man named Orrin Talbot, thin as a whip, dressed in black, with a voice that could peel paint. He moved like a preacher, slow and deliberate, letting every word land before the next one fell. "Ladies and gentlemen of the council," Talbot said, turning toward the gallery as much as the bench. "What you are about to hear is not merely a story of wartime excess. It is a story of calculated cruelty, of a man entrusted with power and who weaponized it for profit." Alistair watched him pace. Talbot was good, too good. Duke Vane commanded the Southern Front for 3 years. In that time, he signed no fewer than 47 execution orders. 47 men and women put to death without trial, without appeal, without mercy. "They were enemy combatants," Alistair said quietly. Pembroke's gavel slammed down. "You will not speak unless called upon, Your Grace." Alistair's jaw tightened. He nodded once. Talbot smiled. "Enemy combatants. Yes, that is what the Duke would have you believe, but our evidence will show something far more sinister. These were not soldiers. They were merchants, farmers, refugees, people whose only crime was standing between Duke Vane and the spoils of war." Another wave of muttering rolled through the room. "Order!" Pembroke snapped. Talbot gestured to his assistant, who carried forward a thick ledger bound in cracked leather. "This," Talbot said, holding it up like a relic, "is the campaign log recovered from the Duke's field office. In it, you will find not only the names of the executed, but also detailed records of property seizures, land transfers, and financial transactions that occurred immediately following their deaths." He opened the ledger. His finger traced a line. "Here, a merchant named Tovar Brennan, executed on the 16th of Harvest Moon. His warehouse, stocked with grain and textiles, was claimed by Duke Vane's forces the very next day. Sold at auction 3 weeks later. The proceeds? 3,200 gold marks, deposited directly into an account bearing the Vane family seal." The room erupted. Alistair didn't move, didn't blink, but his knuckles whitened where they gripped the table's edge. Pembroke's gavel came down twice more. "Order! Order in this chamber!" Talbot waited for silence. Then he closed the ledger softly, almost tenderly. This is not an isolated case. We have documented 17 similar transactions, 17 executions, 17 fortunes claimed, and at the center of it all, he turned, pointing directly at Alistair, stands this man. A hero, they called him. A protector. But what kind of protector profits from the death of the innocent? The question hung in the air like smoke. Alistair met Talbot's gaze and didn't look away. The first witness was a woman named Mara Collis. She was small, mousy, with graying hair pulled back tight, and hands that shook when she took the stand. She didn't look at Alistair, not once. State your name and occupation for the record, Talbot said gently. Mara Collis. I was a clerk in the Duke's Supply Division. And what were your duties, Miss Collis? I kept the logs, tracked shipments, recorded transactions. Talbot nodded. And did you, in the course of your duties, ever witness the Duke ordering executions? Mara's throat bobbed. Yes. Can you describe one such instance? She hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the gallery, then back to her lap. There was a man, a traitor. He'd come to the camp to sell wool. The Duke's soldiers accused him of spying. They brought him to the command tent. And what happened? The Duke questioned him. The man swore he wasn't a spy. He had papers, a license from the capital, but the Duke... She stopped. Her voice cracked. The Duke said it didn't matter. He said anyone who dealt with both sides was an enemy. He gave the order right there. The order to execute him? Yes. And what happened to the man's goods? Mara's hands twisted together. They were confiscated, sold to a supplier in the next town. And the money? It went into the regimental fund, which was controlled by the Duke. Talbot let that settle. Then he turned to the council. No further questions. Pembroke looked at Alistair. Does the defense wish to cross-examine? Alistair's lawyer, a man named Farrow, gray-haired and exhausted, stood slowly. Miss Collis, you said this traitor had papers, a license. Did you see those papers yourself? I think so. You think so? Or you did? I saw him holding something. But you didn't inspect them? No. So you don't actually know if they were legitimate? Mara's voice dropped. No? And you said the Duke questioned him. Did the Duke seem to believe the man was innocent? I don't know what he believed. You don't know, Farrow repeated. So it's possible the Duke acted on intelligence you weren't privy to. Talbot shot to his feet. Objection. Speculation. Sustained, Pembroke said. Farrow sighed. No further questions. Mara was dismissed. She hurried from the stand like it was on fire. Alistair watched her go. She'd worked for him for 2 years. Never missed a day. Never complained. And now she couldn't even look at him. The second witness was worse. Captain Gareth Lonmer, one of Alistair's own officers. Lonmer had been a good soldier once. Solid. Loyal. But somewhere along the way, he'd started drinking more than he should. Started questioning orders. Alistair had reassigned him to a quieter post before the campaign ended. No discharge. No dishonor. Just a clean exit. Apparently that hadn't been enough. Captain Lonmer, Talbot said, you served under Duke Vane during the border campaigns, correct? I did. And in your time under his command, did you ever witness behavior that troubled you? Lonmer's jaw worked. He glanced at Alistair. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or guilt. Then it was gone. Yes, Lonmer said. Tell us. The Duke ran a tight operation, everything by the book. At first. Lonmer's voice was flat, practiced. But as the campaign dragged on, things changed. Orders came down that didn't feel right. Arrests without cause, seizures of civilian property, and the executions. How many executions did you witness? 5, maybe 6. And were these men given trials? No. Did they have legal representation? No. Were they allowed to present evidence in their defense? No. Talbot paused. Captain, in your professional opinion, were these executions lawful? Lonmer's hands curled into fists on the rail. No, they weren't. The courtroom exploded. Pembroke's gavel slammed down over and over. Order! I will clear this chamber if necessary. Alistair sat perfectly still. His face was stone. but inside something cold and sharp twisted in his chest. Pharaoh stood. Captain Lonmer, were you present when these execution orders were issued? Some of them. And did the Duke provide justification for these orders? He said they were enemies of the state. Did you, at any time, challenge those orders? Lonmer hesitated. No. Why not? I didn't think it was my place. But now you believe they were unlawful? Yes. When did you come to that conclusion, Captain? Lonmer's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I mean, Pharaoh said slowly, when did you decide that following your commanding officer's orders during wartime was a crime? Was it when you were reassigned, or was it when Lord Talbot offered you immunity in exchange for testimony? Talbot surged to his feet. Objection! Sustained. Counselor Pharaoh, watch your tone. But the damage was done. A few people in the gallery shifted. Whispers started again. Pharaoh sat down. Lonmer left the stand red-faced. What? By the time they broke for the day, the sun had set. Alistair was escorted out through a side door, away from the reporters, away from the crowd. Two constables flanked him, their expressions unreadable. They took him to a holding room, small, cold, a single chair and a table. A narrow window high on the wall showing nothing but darkening sky. One of the constables unlocked his cuffs. You've got an hour before transport. Alistair nodded. The door closed. The lock turned. He sat. And for the first time all day, he let himself breathe. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. Lonmer, Mara, people he'd trusted, people he'd protected, and now they were lining up to bury him. He closed his eyes, tried to think. The ledger. That was the key. If Talbot's evidence held up, if the council believed that Alistair had profited from those executions, then none of the rest mattered. Intent, circumstance, wartime necessity. It all disappeared under the weight of gold. But Alistair knew the truth. He hadn't taken a damn thing. Every transaction, every auction, every transfer, it had all gone through proper channels. Regimental funds, supply officers, crown auditors. There were records. There had to be. So why weren't they showing up? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door opened. A woman stepped inside. She was tall, sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled back in a tight braid. Her coat was plain but well-tailored. She carried a leather satchel over one shoulder. Duke Vane, she said. Alistair looked up. Do I know you? No, but I know you. She closed the door behind her. My name is Lyra Whitcomb. I'm an investigator. If you're here to dig up more dirt, you're wasting your time. I'm not here for this prosecution. She set the satchel on the table. I'm here because something about this case doesn't add up. Alistair studied her. You think I'm innocent? I think someone went to a lot of trouble to make you look guilty. She opened the satchel and pulled out a folder. And I'd like to know why. He didn't move. What's in the folder? Copies of the prosecution's evidence, ledgers, testimonies, financial records. She met his eyes. I've been going through them for the past week, and there are gaps. Gaps. Inconsistencies. Dates that don't line up. Signatures that look forged. Transactions that disappear halfway through the paper trail. She leaned forward. Someone built this case very carefully, but they got sloppy. Alistair felt something shift in his chest. Not hope. Not yet. But something close. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I don't like being lied to, Lyra said simply. And because if I'm right, whoever framed you is still out there, still profiting, still in power. And if you're wrong? Then you hang, and I go back to chasing insurance fraud. She shrugged. But I'm not wrong. Alistair stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached for the folder. And they worked through the night. Lyra had brought everything, copies of the campaign logs, witness statements, financial records from 3 different banks. She spread it all across the table like a map of a battlefield. Here, she said, pointing to a line in one of the ledgers. Tovar Brennan. The merchant Talbot mentioned, executed on the 16th of Harvest Moon. His warehouse was seized the next day. I remember, Alistair said quietly. But look at this. She pulled out another document. This is the auction record. The sale happened 3 weeks later. Proceeds? 3,200 gold marks. That's what Talbot said. Right. But look at the signature on the transfer order. She slid it toward him. Alistair looked. His own signature, clear as day. "That's not mine," he said. "I know." He looked up sharply. "How?" Lyra pulled out another sheet. "This is a requisition form you signed 2 months earlier. Same pen, same hand. But the slant is different, the pressure's different, and the capital V in vain," she pointed, "curves the wrong way." Alistair stared at the two signatures side by side. She was right. "Who forged it?" he asked. "That's what we need to find out." Lyra sat back. "But it's not just this one. I found 4 other transfer orders with the same discrepancies, all tied to executions, all funneling money into accounts linked to your name, but none of them actually controlled by you. Then who's controlling them?" "I don't know yet." She tapped the folder. "But I know how to find out." Alistair leaned back in his chair. His mind was racing. "You think this goes higher than Talbot? Talbot's a lawyer. He doesn't have the reach to forge military records and plant evidence across 3 provinces. Someone fed him this case. Someone with access. With authority. Someone on the council." Lyra met his eyes. "Or someone close to it." Alistair was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "If you're right, if this is a setup, then whoever's behind it isn't going to let you walk away." "I know. They'll come after you." "Let them." He almost smiled. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Both," Lyra said, "but mostly stubborn." This time, Alistair did smile. Just a little. "All right," he said. "Where do we start?" "Yeah." The next day, the hearing resumed. The gallery was even more packed than before. Word had spread. The trial of the century, they were calling it. People who'd never set foot in a courtroom were lining up hours early just to get a seat. Alistair took his place at the defendant's table. Pharaoh sat beside him, looking older and more tired than ever. "They're bringing in Cedric Halvorn today," Pharaoh muttered. Alistair's head snapped toward him. "What?" "Lord Cedric Halvorn. He's testifying for the prosecution." Alistair's blood went cold. Cedric Halvorn, war profiteer, political snake. A man who'd made his fortune selling weapons to both sides of every conflict for the past 20 years. And now he was going to sit up there and paint Alistair as the villain. "This is a setup," Alistair said quietly. "I know," Pharaoh said, "but there's nothing I can do to stop it." Pembroke's gavel struck. "All rise." The council entered. The room settled. And then Cedric Halvorn was called to the stand. He was a handsome man, tall, silver-haired, dressed in a perfectly tailored coat. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd never worried about money or consequences. He took the oath without hesitation. Talbot approached. "Lord Halvorn, thank you for being here. I know this can't be easy." "It's my duty," Cedric said smoothly. "You served alongside Duke Vane during the border campaigns, correct?" "I did, as a supply contractor." "And in that capacity, did you have frequent dealings with the Duke?" "Yes. I provided arms, rations, medical supplies, whatever the front needed." "And during that time, did you ever witness Duke Vane behaving in a manner inconsistent with his duties?" Cedric hesitated, just long enough to seem reluctant. "Yes." "Can you elaborate?" "The Duke was pragmatic, some might say ruthless. He saw the war as an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" "Profit." The courtroom erupted again. Alistair's hands curled into fists under the table. Cedric continued. "I saw him seize property, redirect funds. He justified it as military necessity, but anyone paying attention could see what was really happening." "And did you ever confront him about this?" "Once. He told me to mind my own business, or I'd end up on the wrong side of an execution order." The gallery gasped. Alistair shot to his feet. "That's a lie!" Pembroke's gavel cracked like thunder. "Sit down, Duke Vane. One more outburst and you will be removed." Pharaoh grabbed Alistair's arm. "Sit down!" Alistair sat, but his eyes never left Cedric. Cedric, for his part, looked calm, almost sympathetic. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I wish I could say otherwise. But the truth is the truth." Talbot nodded. "No further questions." Pharaoh stood slowly. "Lord Halvorn, you said you provided supplies to the front." "I did." "And you were paid for those supplies, correct?" "Of course." How much? Cedric blinked. I'd have to check my records. Roughly. Several 100,000 marks over the course of the campaign. Several 100,000, Pharaoh repeated. That's quite a sum. It was a long war. And did you ever inflate prices? Overcharge the crown? Talbot stood. Objection. Relevance. I'm establishing credibility, Your Honor. Pembroke hesitated. Overruled. Answer the question, Lord Halvorn. Cedric's smile didn't waver. I charged fair market rates. Fair market rates, Pharaoh said. Even during a siege, when demand was high and supply was low? I provided what was needed and made a fortune in the process. Cedric's eyes hardened. I risked my life to keep that army supplied. Did you? Pharaoh picked up a sheet of paper. Because according to transport records, you never once set foot within 10 miles of the front lines. Cedric's jaw tightened. Pharaoh pressed. You sat in a comfortable office in the capital, signed contracts, and watched your bank account grow. Isn't that right? And now you sit here and accuse Duke Vane of the very thing you built your career on. Objection, Talbot roared. Sustained, Counselor Pharaoh. You will restrict yourself to... No further questions, Pharaoh said flatly. He sat down. Cedric left the stand, but his confidence had cracked. Just a little. Alistair leaned toward Pharaoh. That was good. It won't be enough, Pharaoh muttered. He was right. By the end of the day, 3 more witnesses had testified, all of them with damning stories, all of them painting Alistair as a monster. And when the council adjourned, Pembroke's expression said it all. The verdict was already decided. Whoopa. That night, Lyra came to the holding room again. She looked exhausted. Her braid was coming loose, her coat was dusty, but her eyes were sharp. I found something, she said. Alistair straightened. What? She pulled out a stack of papers. Bank records, from the account where the auction proceeds were deposited. And? The account was opened 6 months before the first execution. And the person who opened it? She looked up. Cedric Halvorn. Alistair felt the floor drop out from under him. He framed me, he said slowly. He framed you, Lyra confirmed. And then he set himself up as the righteous witness, the man who tried to stop you. But why? What does he gain? Everything. Lyra spread the papers out. Look, every property you allegedly seized, Cedric bought it. Every fund you supposedly redirected, it went into his accounts. He's been using your name as cover while he looted the war effort blind. Alistair stared at the evidence, and then he started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. He's going to get away with it, Alistair said. Isn't he? Not if we present this tomorrow. They won't believe it. Cedric's too well connected, too respected. Then we make them believe it, Lyra said fiercely. We drag him into the light and we make him answer for it. Alistair looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman, who owed him nothing, was risking everything to save him. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. Lyra met his eyes. Because someone has to. And in that moment, Alistair felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. The morning came too fast. Alistair barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Cedric's face on the stand, smooth, confident, lying through his teeth, and every time he opened them, he saw Lyra's evidence spread across the table like a promise he wasn't sure could be kept. Pharaoh arrived an hour before the hearing resumed. He looked at the bank records, the forged signatures, the paper trail that led straight to Cedric Halvorn's door. His hands shook as he turned the pages. This is it, he said quietly. This could clear you. Could, Alistair repeated. The council has to allow it into evidence first. And even then, Pharaoh stopped. He rubbed his face. Cedric has friends, powerful friends. If we accuse him publicly and can't make it stick, they'll bury us both. Then we make it stick. Pharaoh looked at him. You understand what you're asking me to do. I'm a lawyer, not a crusader. I have a practice, a family. If this goes wrong, it won't. You don't know that. Alistair leaned forward. I know that if we don't try, I'm done. And Cedric walks away clean. So you tell me, Pharaoh, can you live with that? The older man stared at him for a long moment. Then he gathered the papers and shoved them into his case. I'll submit the motion, but you'd better pray Pembroke allows it. He left without another word. Alistair sat alone in the holding room, the walls pressing in around him. Outside, the city was waking up. He could hear the murmur of voices, the clatter of carts, the distant cry of a street vendor hawking bread. Normal life. The kind of life he used to take for granted. Now it felt like something from another world. A constable knocked once and opened the door. "Time to go, Your Grace." Alistair stood. He straightened his coat, adjusted the cuffs. Armor, that's what it was. They walked him down the corridor. The building was already full. He could hear the crowd in the gallery, restless, hungry. They wanted a show. They wanted a verdict. They wanted blood. When he entered the hearing chamber, the noise hit him like a wave. Reporters shouting questions, nobles craning their necks. Somewhere in the back, someone hissed his name like a curse. He kept his head up and walked to the defendant's table. Pharaoh was already there, looking pale but determined. He didn't say anything, just nodded once. Alistair sat. Across the aisle, Talbot was conferring with his assistant. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man who'd already won. Pembroke's gavel struck. "All rise." The council entered. Same 5 faces, same cold stares. "Be seated," Pembroke said. "Before we proceed with testimony, are there any motions from counsel?" Pharaoh stood slowly. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense moves to introduce new evidence." A ripple of surprise went through the room. Pembroke's eyes narrowed. "What kind of evidence?" "Financial records, bank statements, documents that directly contradict the prosecution's claims." Talbot shot to his feet. "Objection! This is highly irregular. The defense has had weeks to prepare. They can't simply produce mystery evidence at the 11th hour." "The evidence was only recently uncovered," Pharaoh said, "and it is directly relevant to the charges against my client." Pembroke tapped his fingers on the bench. "Approach." Both lawyers walked forward. The room went silent, straining to hear. Alistair couldn't make out the words, but he could see Pharaoh gesturing, his voice low and urgent. Talbot's face was red. He kept shaking his head. Finally, Pembroke waved them back. "The motion is granted," he said, "but the defense will have exactly 1 hour to present this evidence. After that, we proceed to closing arguments. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," Pharaoh said. Talbot looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Your Honor, I must protest." "Your protest is noted. Sit down, Counselor." Talbot sat. Alistair let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Pharaoh returned to the table and opened his case. "We're up," he muttered. "Then let's make it count." Pharaoh stood and addressed the council. "Your Honors, the defense calls Lyra Whitcomb to the stand." A murmur went through the gallery. People turned, craning to see. Lyra walked down the aisle. She wore the same plain coat, the same no-nonsense expression. She didn't look nervous. She looked like someone who'd come to settle a score. She took the stand and raised her right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Pharaoh picked up a folder. "Miss Whitcomb, what is your occupation?" "I'm a private investigator. I specialize in financial fraud and forensic accounting." "And how did you come to be involved in this case?" "I was hired by a third party to review the evidence against Duke Vane. The more I looked, the more inconsistencies I found." "What kind of inconsistencies?" Lyra pulled out a sheaf of papers. "For starters, the signatures on the financial transfer orders don't match Duke Vane's actual handwriting. I compared them to authenticated documents from the same time period. The slant is wrong. The pressure is wrong. Even the ink composition is different." Talbot stood. "Objection. Miss Whitcomb is not a certified handwriting expert." "I've analyzed over 200 fraud cases involving forged signatures," Lyra said evenly. "I know what I'm looking at." Pembroke considered. "Overruled. Continue, Miss Whitcomb." Lyra nodded. "Beyond the signatures, there are discrepancies in the dates. For example, one of the executions the Duke is accused of profiting from, Tovar Brennan, supposedly resulted in a property seizure the day after his death. But the auction records show the sale happened 3 weeks later. The funds were deposited into an account bearing the Vane family name, but that account was never opened by Duke Vane. "Who opened it?" Pharaoh asked. Lyra looked directly at the gallery. "Lord Cedric Halvorn." The courtroom exploded. Pembroke's gavel came down hard. "Order! Order!" But the noise didn't stop. People were on their feet. Reporters were scribbling furiously. In the back, someone shouted, "Lies!" Alistair didn't move. He watched Cedric, who sat 3 rows back, his face a mask of stone. Pharaoh raised his voice. "Miss Whitcomb, do you have documentation to support this claim?" "I do." She handed a stack of papers to the bailiff, who brought them to the bench. "Those are copies of the bank records. You'll see Lord Halvorn's signature on the account opening forms. You'll also see a pattern of deposits that coincide exactly with the dates of the alleged property seizures." Pembroke flipped through the pages. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Your Honor," Talbot said, standing quickly, "this is clearly a fabrication. Lord Halvorn is a respected member of this community. To suggest that he would—" "I'm not suggesting," Lyra cut in. "I'm stating a fact. Lord Halvorn used Duke Vane's name to cover his own crimes. He forged documents, redirected funds, and when the war ended, he made sure the blame landed squarely on someone else." Cedric stood. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "This is absurd. I will not sit here and be slandered by some—" "Sit down, Lord Halvorn," Pembroke said sharply. Cedric hesitated, then he sat. Pharaoh turned back to Lyra. "Miss Whitcomb, in your professional opinion, is Duke Vane guilty of the crimes he's been accused of?" "No," Lyra said. "He's not. He's a scapegoat, and the real criminal is sitting 20 feet away." The room erupted again. This time Pembroke didn't even try to restore order. He just let the noise wash over them like a storm. Alistair felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief, not yet, but something close. Finally Pembroke raised his hand. "Enough. We will recess for 1 hour while the council reviews this new evidence. Bailiff, clear the room." "Your Honor," Talbot began. "1 hour, Counselor. That's all." The gavel fell. The constables moved in, ushering people toward the exits. The gallery emptied slowly, everyone talking at once, the air thick with speculation and outrage. Alistair was escorted back to the holding room. Pharaoh followed. "That was good," Alistair said. Pharaoh shook his head. "It was a start. But Cedric's not going to go down without a fight. And if the council decides Lyra's evidence isn't credible, then we're back where we started. Worse, because now Cedric knows we're coming for him." Alistair leaned against the wall. His mind was racing. "What do we need to seal it? What's the final piece?" "A confession," Pharaoh said. "Or someone on the inside willing to testify against him. But Cedric's people are loyal. They won't turn." "Everyone turns eventually," Alistair said quietly. "You just have to find the right pressure point." Pharaoh gave him a sharp look. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Cedric made a lot of money off this war, and money leaves a trail. If Lyra can follow it far enough, we'll find someone who doesn't want to go down with him. That could take weeks. We don't have weeks. We have an hour." Alistair pushed off the wall. "Get Lyra in here, now." Pharaoh hesitated. Then he left. 5 minutes later, Lyra arrived. "What do you need?" she asked. "Names," Alistair said. "Anyone who worked with Cedric during the campaign, suppliers, contractors, clerks, anyone who might have seen something they weren't supposed to." Lyra pulled out a notebook. "I've got a list, but most of them are too scared to talk. Cedric has reach. People who cross him tend to disappear." "Then we find someone who's already disappeared," Alistair said. "Someone who's got nothing left to lose." Lyra flipped through her notes. Her eyes stopped on a name. "There's a man, Edmund Trask. He was one of Cedric's senior accountants, handled all the war contracts. He left the capital 6 months ago. No forwarding address, no contact with anyone." "Why'd he leave?" "I don't know, but the timing's suspicious. Right around when the investigation into you started." Alistair nodded slowly. "He knows something." "Maybe. But finding him—" "Find him," Alistair said. "You've got 45 minutes. Lyra stared at him, then she smiled. "You're insane." "I've been told." She turned and left, already pulling out her notebook. Pharaoh sank into a chair. "Even if she finds him, he won't make it here in time." "He doesn't have to be here," Alistair said. "He just has to talk." Pharaoh frowned. "What are you planning?" Alistair didn't answer. The minutes crawled by. Alistair paced. Pharaoh sat in silence, occasionally checking his pocket watch. The city outside continued its indifferent hum. Finally, the door opened. Lyra stepped in, breathless. "I found him." Alistair's head snapped up. "Where?" A boarding house on the south side, under a false name. But it's him. She held up a piece of paper. And he's willing to talk. For a price. How much? Immunity, a clean exit, and protection. Alistair looked at Pharaoh. Can we offer that? Not officially. Not without the council's approval. Then we lie. Pharaoh's eyes widened. You want me to promise him immunity we can't guarantee? I want you to get him on record, Alistair said. Once his testimony is entered, it doesn't matter what we promised. The truth is out there. Pharaoh stood. That's necessary, Alistair cut in. We're out of time and out of options. So either we do this or we let Cedric walk. Pharaoh stared at him. Then he grabbed his case. Where is he? Lyra handed him the address. I'll take you. They left. Alistair was alone again. He sat down heavily, his hands shaking, not from fear, from exhaustion, from the weight of everything that had brought him to this moment. He thought about the soldiers he'd commanded, the orders he'd given, the men and women who'd died under his watch. Some of those deaths had been necessary. Some of them still haunted him, but none of them had been for profit. And if Cedric got away with this, if the world believed that Alistair had sold out everything he stood for, then those deaths would mean nothing. He couldn't let that happen. The door opened. A constable stepped in. They're calling you back. Alistair stood. Already? Council's ready. He followed the constable down the hall. The gallery was packed again. The air was electric. When he entered, every head turned. He walked to the defendant's table. Pharaoh wasn't there yet. Pembroke struck his gavel. The council has reviewed the evidence submitted by the defense. We have questions. Alistair's stomach dropped. Where is your counsel? Pembroke asked. Alistair hesitated. He's following a lead, Your Honor. Pembroke's eyes narrowed. This is highly irregular. I understand, but the evidence he's gathering is critical to my defense. We cannot delay these proceedings indefinitely, Duke Vane. I'm not asking you to, just give him 10 minutes. Pembroke exchanged glances with the other council members. Lady Ashford leaned forward and whispered something. Pembroke frowned. 5 minutes, he said. After that, we proceed without him. Thank you, Your Honor. Pembroke sat back, clearly annoyed. Alistair stood alone at the table, acutely aware of every eye on him. The seconds ticked by like hammer strikes. 3 minutes. 4. The door at the back of the chamber burst open. Pharaoh strode in, his face flushed, his case under his arm. Behind him was Lyra, and behind her, a man Alistair didn't recognize. Thin, balding, nervous as hell. Edmund Trask. Pharaoh reached the table, breathing hard. Your Honor, the defense calls Edmund Trask to the stand. Talbot shot to his feet. Objection! This witness was not disclosed. The defense just became aware of him, Pharaoh said quickly. His testimony is directly relevant. Pembroke looked ready to explode. Counselor Pharaoh, you are testing my patience. I understand, Your Honor, but if you hear what this man has to say, you'll understand why we moved so quickly. Pembroke glared at him. Then he waved his hand. Proceed, but this is your last chance. Pharaoh nodded. He turned to Trask. Please take the stand. Trask walked forward slowly, like a man heading to the gallows. He looked at Cedric once, just once, and flinched. He took the stand and swore the oath. Pharaoh approached. State your name and occupation. Edmund Trask, I was an accountant for Halvorn Logistics. And what did that job entail? I managed the books, tracked expenses, handled contracts for military supplies during the border campaigns. And in the course of that work, did you ever witness anything illegal? Trask swallowed hard. His hands gripped the rail. Yes. The room went still. What did you witness? Pharaoh asked. Trask's voice was barely a whisper. Lord Halvorn was skimming, taking money from the contracts and funneling it into private accounts. He'd inflate the prices, charge the crown double, and pocket the difference. And did anyone else know about this? Just me. And a few others. But we couldn't say anything. He threatened us, said if we talked, we'd end up like the others. What others? Trask looked down. There were 3 men who worked for him. They found out what he was doing. They were going to report it. 2 of them disappeared. The third, his voice cracked. They said it was an accident, but it wasn't. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Pharaoh pressed on. Mr. Trask, did Lord Halvorn ever mention Duke Vane in connection with these activities? Yes, he said. Trask hesitated. He said the Duke was a perfect scapegoat, a war hero with enemies, someone the public would believe was capable of corruption. And did Lord Halvorn take steps to frame Duke Vane? Yes. He forged documents, created fake accounts in the Duke's name. He fed information to the prosecutors, made sure the trail led straight to him. Pharaoh turned to the council. No further questions. Pembroke looked at Talbot. Cross-examine? Talbot stood. He looked rattled. Mr. Trask, you claim Lord Halvorn threatened you, yet here you are testifying against him. Why now? Trask met his eyes. Because I'm tired of running, and because what he did was wrong. Or because the defense offered you something in exchange for your testimony. No one offered me anything, Trask said quietly, except a chance to tell the truth. Talbot opened his mouth, closed it. He had nothing. No further questions, he muttered. Trask stepped down. The room was silent. Pembroke looked at Alistair, then at Cedric. Lord Halvorn, he said, stand. Cedric rose slowly. His face was pale, but his expression was still composed. Do you have anything to say in response to these allegations? Cedric's jaw tightened. This is a witch hunt, a desperate attempt by a guilty man to... Do you deny the allegations? Pembroke cut in. Cedric hesitated, and in that hesitation, everything unraveled. He began. Yes or no, Lord Halvorn? Cedric's hands curled into fists. I acted in the best interest of... That's not an answer. The silence stretched. Finally, Cedric looked away. No, I don't deny it. The courtroom exploded. Pembroke's gavel came down over and over, but it was useless. The noise was deafening. Reporters bolted for the doors, nobles shouted, constables moved in, trying to restore order. Alistair sat perfectly still, his heart pounding. It was over. Cedric was led from the chamber in cuffs, his head down, his empire crumbling around him. Talbot gathered his papers in silence, his face ashen. And Pembroke, for the first time in the entire trial, looked at Alistair without contempt. Duke Vane, he said, this council owes you an apology. Alistair stood. I don't want an apology, Your Honor. I want my name back. Pembroke nodded. You'll have it. The charges are dismissed, effective immediately. The gavel fell one last time. And just like that, it was over. Alistair walked out of the hearing chamber into chaos. Reporters swarmed him the moment he stepped through the doors. Flashbulbs popped. Voices shouted over each other, a wall of noise that made his head throb. Duke Vane, how does it feel to be vindicated? Will you press charges against Lord Halvorn? What's next for you? He didn't answer, just kept walking, shoulders squared, eyes forward. Pharaoh and Lyra flanked him like guards, pushing through the crowd. Someone grabbed his sleeve. He shook them off. They made it to the street. A carriage was waiting, the driver looking nervous as the mob pressed closer. Get in, Pharaoh said, yanking the door open. Alistair climbed inside. Lyra followed. Pharaoh slammed the door shut and the driver cracked the reins. The carriage lurched forward, wheels clattering over cobblestones. Inside, the noise faded. Alistair leaned back against the seat and closed his eyes. You all right? Lyra asked. I don't know. Pharaoh was breathing hard, his case clutched in his lap. I can't believe we pulled that off. We didn't pull anything off, Alistair said quietly. Trask did. Without him, I'd be in chains right now. Where is he? Lyra asked. Safe house on the east side. I arranged it before we left. Pharaoh wiped his face. He'll stay there until the dust settles. If it settles, Alistair muttered. Lyra frowned. What do you mean? Alistair opened his eyes. Cedric didn't act alone. You said it yourself. He has allies, powerful ones. They're not going to let this go. And now that he's been exposed, they'll be scrambling to cover their own tracks. You think they'll come after you? I think they'll come after anyone who knows too much. He looked at Lyra. That includes you. She didn't flinch. Let them try. Pharaoh shook his head. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. No, Alistair agreed. It's not. The carriage rolled through the city. Outside, people went about their lives, buying bread, haggling over prices, laughing with friends. Normal. Safe. Alistair envied them. They reached his townhouse an hour later. The place was dark, the windows shuttered. He'd barely been here in months. It smelled like dust and old wood. Pharaoh and Lara followed him inside. "I'll make tea," Lara said, heading for the kitchen. Pharaoh set his case down on the table. "What are you going to do now?" Alistair walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The street was empty. For now. "I don't know. The council cleared you. Your name's been restored. You could go back to... To what?" Alistair turned. "My command? My title? You think anyone's going to trust me after this? I've been dragged through the mud for weeks. Half the kingdom still thinks I'm guilty. The truth will come out. The truth doesn't matter. People believe what they want to believe." He let the curtain fall. "I'm done, Pharaoh. The moment I walked into that courtroom, my life ended. This," he gestured around the room, "is just the aftermath." Pharaoh was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "So you're giving up?" "I'm being realistic. You're feeling sorry for yourself." Alistair's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Pharaoh stepped closer, his voice hard. "I get it. You've been through hell, but you're alive. You're free, and you've got a chance to do something about the mess Cedric left behind. So either you step up or you let them win." Alistair stared at him. "You're lecturing me about stepping up? You wanted to quit this morning." "I know, and you talked me out of it, so now I'm returning the favor." Lyra appeared in the doorway, holding 3 cups. "He's right, you know. Cedric's in custody, but his network isn't. If we don't shut it down, someone else will just take his place." "That's not my problem," Alistair said. "Yes, it is," Lyra shot back. "Because they used your name, your reputation. They made you the villain while they got rich. You don't get to walk away and pretend none of it matters." Alistair wanted to argue, wanted to tell them both to leave him alone, but he couldn't, because she was right. He sank into a chair. "What do you want me to do?" "Help us finish this," Lyra said. "We've got Cedric, but there are others, people who knew what he was doing and turned a blind eye, people who profited from the same schemes. We need to find them, expose them, make sure they can't do this to anyone else." "And how do we do that?" "The same way we brought down Cedric. Follow the money, find the witnesses, build the case." Pharaoh nodded. "The council will want a full investigation now. They'll assign auditors, prosecutors, but that'll take months, maybe years. In the meantime, Cedric's allies will cover their tracks, unless we move first." Alistair rubbed his temples. "You're talking about going after some of the most powerful people in the kingdom, without official backing, without resources. You understand how insane that sounds?" "Yes," Lyra said, "but we've done insane before, and we won." Alistair looked at her, then at Pharaoh. 2 people who barely knew him, who owed him nothing, and who were willing to risk everything to see this through. He didn't deserve them. But maybe that didn't matter. "All right, Waj," he said. "Where do we start?" Lyra pulled out her notebook. "I've been tracking Cedric's financial network for weeks. There are at least 6 major accounts tied to shell companies. Some of them go back years, but there's one that stands out." "Why?" "Because it's still active. Even after Cedric was arrested, there have been transfers, large ones. Someone's moving money." Pharaoh leaned forward. "Who controls the account?" "I don't know yet. The ownership's buried under layers of holding companies. But I've got a lead." She flipped a page. "There's a broker in the merchant district. Name's Oswin Vale. He handles transactions for high-level clients, discreetly. You think he's involved?" "I think he knows who is." Alistair stood. "Then we talked to him." "It's not that simple," Lyra said. "Vale's careful. He doesn't meet with anyone he doesn't trust. And he definitely doesn't talk to investigators." "So we don't go as investigators." Alistair looked at Pharaoh. "Can you get me a letter of introduction? Something that makes me look like a potential client." Pharaoh frowned. "You want to pose as a buyer?" Why not? I've got a title, a reputation. As far as Vale knows, I'm just another noble looking to move money quietly." Lyra considered. "It could work, but if he figures out who you really are, then we improvise." She smiled faintly. "You're starting to sound like me. Is that a good thing?" "Depends on how much you like trouble." Pharaoh sighed. "I'll write the letter, but if this goes wrong, don't expect me to bail you out." Noted. They spent the rest of the evening preparing. Pharaoh drafted the introduction. Lyra briefed Alistair on Vale's background, his habits, his associates, his weaknesses. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. "Get some sleep," Lyra said, gathering her things. "We'll move in the morning." Alistair nodded. After they left, he sat alone in the dark townhouse, listening to the city settle into silence. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was full of faces. Cedric, Lonmere, Mara, people he'd trusted, people who'd betrayed him. And underneath it all, a single question. What if they were right? What if he really was the monster they'd painted him as? He woke before dawn, sweat-soaked and restless. The question lingered. By the time Lyra and Pharaoh arrived, he'd already dressed and eaten, or tried to. The food sat like lead in his stomach. "You look terrible," Lyra said. "Thanks. I mean it. If you're not ready, I'm ready." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. They took a hired carriage to the merchant district. The streets were crowded, full of traders hauling crates and shouting prices. The air smelled like fish and sweat and old money. Vale's office was tucked between a shipping company and a pawn shop. Unremarkable. That was the point. Alistair climbed out first. Pharaoh handed him the letter. "Remember, you're looking to invest. Keep it vague. Let him do the talking." "Got it." Lyra stayed in the carriage. "I'll keep watch. If anything goes wrong, get out fast." Alistair nodded and walked inside. The office was small, dimly lit, lined with shelves full of ledgers. A clerk sat at a desk near the door, scribbling in a log. He looked up. "Help you?" "I have an appointment with Mr. Vale." Alistair handed him the letter. The clerk read it, then stood. "Wait here." He disappeared through a door at the back. A minute later, he returned. "He'll see you." Alistair followed him into a cramped office. Vale sat behind a desk, a thin man with sharp eyes and a calculating smile. "Duke Vane," he said, rising. "An honor. Please sit." Alistair sat. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice." "Of course, your letter said you're looking for discreet financial services." "That's right." Vale folded his hands. "I handle a variety of transactions for clients who value privacy. What exactly are you looking for?" "I've recently come into a significant sum. I'd like to move it without drawing attention." "I see. And the source of these funds?" "Does it matter?" Vale smiled. "Not to me. But I do need to ensure there's no undue risk. You understand?" "Perfectly." Vale leaned back. "How much are we talking about?" 50,000 marks. To start. Vale's eyebrows rose. To start. Ambitious. And where would you like this money to go? Somewhere safe, preferably offshore. Vale nodded slowly. "I can arrange that. For a fee, of course." "Of course." Vale opened a drawer and pulled out a ledger. "I'll need some information. Name, account details, a deposit to secure the arrangement." Alistair hesitated. This was the moment. Push too far, and Vale would get suspicious. But if he didn't push at all, he'd walk out with nothing. "Before we proceed," Alistair said, "I'd like to know who else you've worked with. References? To ensure I'm in good company." Vale's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. "My clients value their privacy, Your Grace. I don't disclose names." "Not even to potential clients?" "Not even to potential clients." Alistair leaned forward. "Then how do I know you're trustworthy?" "You don't," Vale said simply. "That's the nature of this business. Either you trust me or you find someone else." They stared at each other. Alistair made a decision. "I know about Cedric Halvern," he said. Vale's expression didn't change, but his hand twitched toward the drawer. "I don't know what you're talking about," Vale said. "Yes, you do. He used your services, moved money through shell accounts, laundered profits from the war, and now he's in custody." Alistair's voice was steady. "Which means whoever else was involved is scrambling to cover their tracks. That includes you." Vale's jaw tightened. "You should leave." "I'm not here to threaten you," Alistair said. "I'm here to offer you a choice. You can cooperate, tell me who else was involved, or you can wait for the auditors to show up. Because they will, and when they do, they'll tear this place apart." Vale's hand slid into the drawer. Alistair saw the glint of metal. He moved. His chair scraped back. He grabbed the edge of the desk and shoved it forward. Vale stumbled, the gun half drawn. Alistair lunged, catching his wrist and twisting hard. The gun clattered to the floor. Vale swung at him. Alistair blocked, drove his elbow into Vale's ribs. The man gasped and went down. Alistair pinned him against the desk, one hand locked around his throat. "Tell me who else," he said. Vale wheezed. I don't... Alistair tightened his grip. "Names."
"Ashford," Vale choked out. "Lady Ashford. She's one of them." Alistair froze. "The council member?" Vale nodded frantically. Alistair let go. Vale slumped against the desk, coughing. "Anyone else?" "Greaves, Renwick, maybe more. I don't know all of them. I just moved the money." Alistair stepped back. His hands were shaking. Lady Ashford, Lord Greaves, Magistrate Renwick, 3 members of the High Council, the same council that had tried him, judged him. They'd known. They'd all known. Vale scrambled to his feet, eyes wild. "You can't... If you tell anyone, I'm going to tell everyone," Alistair said coldly. He turned and walked out. The clerk looked up, startled. Alistair ignored him and pushed through the door into the street. Lyra was out of the carriage in an instant. "What happened?" "We need to leave. Now." They climbed in. The driver didn't ask questions, just snapped the reins. As the carriage rolled away, Alistair told them what Vale had said. Farrow went pale. 3 council members. That's not possible." "It's possible," Lyra said grimly. "Cedric couldn't have pulled this off alone. He needed people on the inside, people with power." "But Ashford presided over the trial," Farrow said. "If she was involved, then the whole thing was rigged from the start," Alistair finished. Farrow stared at him. "What do we do?" Alistair didn't answer right away. His mind was racing. Ashford, Greaves, Renwick. If they'd been part of Cedric's network, then everything, the charges, the witnesses, the evidence, had been orchestrated, and they'd almost gotten away with it. "We go public," Alistair said. "With what?" Farrow asked. "Vale's confession? He'll deny everything, and without proof, then we get proof." Lyra pulled out her notebook. "Ashford, Greaves, and Renwick all have estates outside the city. If they're hiding records, that's where they'll be." "So we break in," Alistair said. Farrow's eyes widened. "You're talking about burglarizing council members. That's necessary. It's suicide." "Maybe," Alistair said. "But if we don't, they'll bury this. And everyone who helped them. Including us." Lyra looked at him. "I'm in." Farrow groaned. "You're both insane." "Probably," Alistair said. "So what's it going to be?" Farrow stared out the window for a long moment. Then he sighed. "I'm going to regret this. Most likely. Fine. But I'm not breaking into anything. I'll stay with the carriage." Lyra grinned. "Deal." They spent the rest of the day planning. Lyra had already scouted Ashford's estate weeks ago, back when she'd first started investigating Cedric's network. The place was large, well guarded, but not impenetrable. "There's a servant's entrance on the east side," Lyra said, sketching a rough map. "It's usually unlocked during the day. If we time it right, we can slip in when the guards change shifts." "And once we're inside?" Alistair asked. "Ashford's study is on the 2nd floor. If she's keeping records, that's where they'll be." "What about Greaves and Renwick?" "We hit Ashford first. If we find what we need, we can worry about the others later." Alistair nodded. "When do we go?" "Tonight." Farrow looked sick. "Tonight. Of course it's tonight." They waited until dark. The city quieted, the streets emptying as people retreated indoors. Alistair changed into plain clothes, nothing that would mark him as a duke. Lyra did the same. The carriage dropped them a block from Ashford's estate. Farrow stayed behind, clutching the reins and looking miserable. "If we're not back in an hour," Alistair said, "leave." "I'm not leaving you." "If we're not back in an hour, we're not coming back, so leave." Farrow nodded reluctantly. Alistair and Lyra moved through the shadows. The estate loomed ahead, all stone walls and iron gates. Lights flickered in a few windows. They circled to the east side. The servant's entrance was exactly where Lyra had said it would be. She tested the handle. It turned. "Told you," she whispered. They slipped inside. The corridor was narrow, dimly lit by a single lantern. Somewhere deeper in the house, voices murmured. Footsteps echoed.
Lyra led the way. They moved quickly, staying close to the walls, up a staircase, down another hall. Ashford's study was at the end. Lyra picked the lock in under a minute. The door swung open. Inside, the study was exactly what Alistair expected. Shelves lined with books, a large desk covered in papers, a fireplace crackling softly. "Start looking," Lyra said. They worked fast. Alistair rifled through the desk drawers. Letters, bills, nothing incriminating. Lyra checked the shelves. "Here." She pulled down a ledger, similar to the one Talbot had used in the trial. She flipped it open. Her eyes widened. "What is it?" Alistair asked. She turned the book toward him. Inside were rows of entries, dates, amounts, names. Cedric's name appeared over and over, but so did others. Greaves, Renwick, and Ashford herself. Every transaction documented, every bribe, every payoff. "This is it," Lyra breathed. "This is everything." Alistair reached for the ledger. The door slammed open. A man stepped inside, tall, armed, one of Ashford's guards. "Don't move," he said, leveling a pistol at them. Alistair froze. Behind the guard, more footsteps echoed. Voices shouted. The house was waking up. Lyra's hand drifted toward her coat. "Alistair." "Don't," he said quietly. The guard's eyes flicked between them. "Drop whatever you're holding." Lyra hesitated. Then she set the ledger on the desk. "Now step back." They stepped back. The guard moved forward, keeping the pistol trained on them. He glanced at the ledger. His face went pale. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. More guards appeared in the doorway, and behind them, stepping into the light, was Lady Ashford herself. She looked at Alistair, then at the ledger. Her expression didn't change. "Take them," she said. The guards closed in, their boots heavy on the hardwood floor. Alistair's mind raced, calculating distances, angles, odds, none of them good. Lady Ashford stood in the doorway, backlit by the corridor lamps. She looked calm, too calm, like she'd been expecting this. "Duke Vane," she said, "breaking into a council member's home, I have to say, I thought you were smarter than this." "Desperate times," Alistair said. "Indeed." She stepped into the room, her gaze sliding to Lyra. "And who's this? Your accomplice?" Lyra said nothing. Ashford walked to the desk and picked up the ledger. She flipped through it casually, as if it were a novel she'd read 100 times. "You came for this, I assume." "You know we did," Alistair said. "And what did you plan to do with it? Take it to the authorities? To the council?" She smiled faintly. "I am the council, Your Grace. Or did you forget?" "I didn't forget," Alistair said. "I just stopped believing you represented justice." Ashford set the ledger down. Justice. Such a noble word, so rarely applicable in the real world. She nodded to the guards. "Take them to the cellar. Make sure they're comfortable. We'll decide what to do with them in the morning." The guards moved forward. Alistair didn't move. "You're making a mistake." "Am I? People know we're here. If we don't come back..." "Then they'll assume you were caught in the act of burglary and dealt with accordingly." Ashford's voice was ice. "You're not a hero anymore, Duke Vane. You're a disgraced soldier with a vendetta. No one will mourn you." One of the guards grabbed Alistair's arm. He jerked free, and the guard's hand went to his belt, fingers closing around a truncheon. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," the guard said. Alistair looked at Lyra. Her eyes were sharp, alert, waiting for a signal. He gave it. Alistair drove his elbow into the guard's throat. The man choked and stumbled back. Lyra moved at the same instant, grabbing the nearest guard's wrist and twisting. He yelped, and she slammed his hand into the desk. The pistol clattered to the floor. Alistair lunged for the ledger. Another guard tackled him from the side. They went down hard, the impact driving the air from Alistair's lungs. He rolled, threw a punch. It connected with the guard's jaw, and the man's head snapped back. Lyra had the pistol now. She aimed it at the remaining guards. "Back off." They froze. Ashford hadn't moved. She stood by the door, watching. "This won't end well for you." "Maybe not," Lyra said. "But it's not ending well for you either." Alistair got to his feet, grabbed the ledger, and shoved it into his coat. "Let's go." They backed toward the window. Lyra kept the pistol trained on the guards. Ashford just watched, her expression unreadable. "You can't run forever," she said. "Watch me," Alistair said. He threw open the window. Cold night air rushed in. Below, the garden stretched dark and empty, a 10-foot drop, maybe more. "Jump," Lyra said. Alistair jumped. He hit the ground hard, his knees buckling. Pain shot through his ankle, but he forced himself up. A second later, Lyra landed beside him, more graceful, already moving. Shouts erupted from the house above. Lights flared in the windows. They ran. The estate grounds were a maze of hedges and fountains. Alistair's ankle screamed with every step, but he didn't slow. Behind them, the guards poured out of the house, torches blazing. "This way," Lyra hissed, veering left. They cut through a flower bed, trampling roses, and reached the outer wall. It was high, too high. "Climb," Alistair said. "How?" He grabbed a trellis bolted to the wall and tested it. It held, barely. "Like this." He hauled himself up, ignoring the splinters digging into his palms. The trellis creaked and swayed. He didn't look down, just kept climbing. At the top, he swung a leg over and dropped to the other side. The impact sent another jolt through his ankle. He bit back a curse. Lyra landed beside him a moment later. "You all right?" "I'll live. Move." They sprinted down the street. Behind them, the guards were still searching the grounds, shouting to each other. But the night was dark, and the city sprawled wide. They had a head start. For now. They reached the corner where Pharaoh waited. He was pacing beside the carriage, pale and sweating. Thank that he stopped. "What happened?" "No time," Alistair said, climbing in. "Drive." Pharaoh scrambled onto the driver's bench. The carriage lurched forward. Inside, Alistair slumped against the seat, breathing hard. Lyra sat across from him, the pistol still in her hand. "We got it," she said, nodding at his coat. Alistair pulled out the ledger. Even in the dim light, he could see the rows of names, the damning evidence. "Yeah," he said. "We got it. Now what?" "Now we make sure everyone sees it." The carriage rattled through the empty streets. Pharaoh drove like he was being chased, which, technically, he was. By the time they reached Alistair's townhouse, the horses were lathered and trembling. They tumbled out and hurried inside. Pharaoh locked the door behind them, then sagged against it. "We just broke into a council member's estate," he said. "We assaulted her guards. We stole her property. Do you understand what this means?" "It means we're committed," Alistair said. "It means we're criminals." "We were criminals the moment we started digging into this." Lyra set the pistol on the table. "The only difference now is we've got proof." Pharaoh looked at the ledger. "What good is proof if we can't present it? Ashford will claim it's fabricated, and without a neutral authority to verify it." "Then we don't go to the authorities," Alistair said. "We go to the people." Lyra's eyes lit up. "The press." "Exactly." Pharaoh shook his head. "You want to leak this to the newspapers? That's the only move we have left," Alistair finished. "Ashford, Greaves, Renwick. They control the council. They control the courts. But they don't control public opinion. Not yet." Lyra nodded slowly. "If we get this into the right hands, someone with reach, with credibility—" "They'll print it," Alistair said. "And once it's out there, Ashford can't bury it." Pharaoh rubbed his face. "This is insane, you know that, right?" "I'm starting to think insane is our baseline," Alistair said. Lyra was already flipping through her notebook. "There's a journalist, name's Callum Greaves, no relation to the council member. He runs an independent paper, publishes out of a print shop near the docks. He's got a reputation for going after corruption." "Will he take the story?" Alistair asked. "If we give him something solid, yes. And this," she tapped the ledger, "is as solid as it gets." "Then we go to him," Alistair said. "Tonight." Pharaoh groaned. "Of course it's tonight." They changed clothes again, this time into something that wouldn't draw attention in the dock district. Alistair's ankle was swelling, but he wrapped it tight and ignored the pain. The city at night was a different animal. The streets near the docks were narrow and crowded, full of sailors and dock workers and people who didn't ask questions. The air smelled like salt and tar and cheap liquor. Lyra led them to a cramped building wedged between a tavern and a warehouse. A sign above the door read, "The Voice." Below it, in smaller letters, "Truth over comfort." "Subtle," Alistair muttered. Lyra knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. A slot in the door slid open, eyes peered out. We're closed. We need to see Callum Greaves, Lyra said. Come back tomorrow. It can't wait. Everything can wait.
Alistair stepped forward. Tell him Duke Vane is here, and I've got a story that'll change the kingdom. The eyes narrowed, then the slot snapped shut. A moment later, the door opened. A man stood there, middle-aged, ink-stained fingers, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Duke Vane, he said. Didn't expect to see you in this part of town. Desperate times, Alistair said. Greaves smirked. So I've heard. Come in.
They followed him inside. The building was cramped, lined with printing presses and stacks of paper. The air smelled like ink and metal. A few workers glanced up, then went back to their tasks. Greaves led them to a small office at the back. He gestured to a pair of chairs. Sit, talk. Alistair sat. Lyra remained standing. I'll cut to the chase, Alistair said. I've got evidence that 3 members of the High Council, Lady Ashford, Lord Greaves, and Magistrate Renwick, were part of Cedric Halvern's network. They profited from the war, covered up his crimes, and framed me to protect themselves. Greaves leaned back. That's a hell of a claim. I've got proof. Alistair pulled out the ledger and set it on the desk. Greaves picked it up. He flipped through it slowly, his expression unreadable. After a long moment, he set it down. This is real, he said. I know. If I print this, they'll come after me. They'll come after all of us, Alistair said. But if you don't print it, they win. And everything Cedric did, everything they helped him do, gets buried. Greaves studied him. Why should I trust you? You were on trial 2 days ago. For all I know, this ledger's a forgery. Then verify it, Lyra said. Cross-reference the account numbers, check the dates, talk to the people involved. We're not asking you to take our word for it. We're asking you to investigate. Greaves tapped the ledger. And if it checks out? Then you run the story, Alistair said. Front page, every detail. You expose them for what they are. Greaves was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window. Outside, the docks stretched dark and chaotic. I've been doing this for 20 years, he said. Published stories that got people fired, got laws changed, got myself threatened, beaten, and nearly killed more times than I can count. And you know what I've learned? What? Alistair asked. The truth doesn't always win. Sometimes it just gets you killed. He turned. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it changes everything. He walked back to his desk and picked up the ledger. I'll run it, but I need 2 days to verify the details. Can you stay hidden that long? We'll manage, Alistair said. Good, because the moment this hits the streets, all hell's going to break loose. They left the print shop an hour later. The city was quieter now, the taverns emptying, the streets settling into uneasy silence. Pharaoh was waiting with the carriage. Well? He's running the story, Lyra said. Pharaoh looked like he might be sick. Then we're committed. We've been committed, Alistair said. This just makes it official. They returned to the townhouse. Alistair posted Pharaoh as lookout while he and Lyra went through the ledger again, cataloging every entry, every name, every transaction. The deeper they dug, the worse it got. Ashford, Greaves, and Renwick had been bleeding the kingdom dry for years, and Cedric had been their instrument. How did no one see this? Lyra asked. Because they didn't want to, Alistair said. It's easier to look the other way when you're not the one paying the price. Lyra closed the ledger. You think Greaves will really run it? I think he will. The question is whether anyone will care. They'll care, Lyra said. Once they see the proof, once they understand what was taken from them, they'll care. Alistair wanted to believe her, but he'd seen too much cynicism, too much apathy. People didn't rise up. They endured. They survived. And they let the powerful stay powerful because it was easier than fighting. Still, he didn't say that. Because Lyra needed to believe it. And maybe, just maybe, she was right. The next 2 days were the longest of Alistair's life. They stayed inside, windows shuttered, door locked. Pharaoh brought food from the market, careful to avoid attention. Lyra paced like a caged animal, checking her notes, cross-referencing details. Alistair tried to rest, but sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards made his hand drift toward the knife he'd taken from Ashford's guard. Every shadow felt like a threat. On the second night, Pharaoh burst through the door, breathless. It's out, he said. Alistair stood. The story? Pharaoh nodded. He held up a newspaper. The headline screamed in bold type, "Corruption at the highest level. Council members implicated in wartime fraud." Below it, Greaves had printed excerpts from the ledger. Names, amounts, dates, everything. "He did it," Lyra breathed. Alistair took the paper and scanned the article. Greaves had been thorough. He'd verified the accounts, tracked the transactions, even interviewed sources who corroborated the claims. It was meticulous, damning, and now everyone would see it. "What happens now?" Pharaoh asked. "Now we wait," Alistair said. They didn't have to wait long. By morning, the city was in uproar. People filled the streets, waving copies of the paper, shouting for answers. A crowd gathered outside the council building, demanding Ashford's resignation. Merchants closed their shops, workers abandoned their posts. The kingdom had woken up, and it was furious. Alistair watched from the window as the crowd grew. There had to be thousands of them now. Ordinary people. The ones who'd lost sons and daughters in the war, the ones who'd paid taxes while nobles got rich. They weren't quiet anymore. "This is it," Lyra said, standing beside him. "This is the moment." Alistair nodded, but he didn't feel triumphant. He felt tired, hollowed out. A knock at the door made them both turn. Pharaoh opened it cautiously. A man stood there, dressed in the livery of the royal courier. "Message for Duke Vane," he said, holding out a sealed letter. Alistair took it. The seal bore the king's mark. He broke it open and read. The king was summoning him, not to stand trial, not to answer charges, but to testify before an emergency session of the council, to present his evidence, to tell his story. Alistair looked up. "The king wants to see me." Lyra's eyes widened. "When?" "Tomorrow. Noon." Pharaoh swallowed. "That's our chance," Alistair finished. "This is our chance to end it." The next day, Alistair walked into the council chamber for the second time in as many weeks. But this time, everything was different. The gallery was packed, not with nobles and reporters, but with ordinary citizens, people who'd read the story, people who wanted answers. The council sat at the bench. Pembroke was there. So were a few others. But Ashford's seat was empty. So were Greaves and Renwick's. They were in custody. The king sat in a chair at the center of the room, flanked by royal guards. He was older than Alistair remembered, his hair more silver, his face lined with years of decisions. But his eyes were sharp. "Duke Vane," the king said, "approach." Alistair walked forward. His ankle still ached, but he kept his stride even. "Your Majesty." The king gestured to the ledger which sat on the bench in front of Pembroke. "This evidence, you obtained it how?" "By breaking into Lady Ashford's estate," Alistair said. There was no point in lying. "And stealing it from her study." A murmur went through the gallery. The king's eyebrow rose. "You confessed to burglary." "I confessed to doing what was necessary," Alistair said, "because the system designed to protect us had been corrupted from the inside, and you took it upon yourself to correct that corruption. Someone had to." The king leaned back. "Bold, reckless. Some might say treasonous." "Some might," Alistair agreed, "but I'd do it again." The king studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to Pembroke. "Have the records been verified?" "They have, Your Majesty," Pembroke said quietly. "Every entry matches bank statements and transaction logs. The evidence is legitimate." The king nodded. "Then let the record show that Lady Ashford, Lord Greaves, and Magistrate Renwick are hereby stripped of their titles and remanded to stand trial for treason, fraud, and conspiracy." The gallery erupted in applause. The king raised a hand. Silence fell. "And as for you, Duke Vane," the king said, "you have committed crimes in pursuit of justice. Normally, that would not absolve you, but these are not normal times." He paused. "Your service to the realm during the war was exemplary. Your actions in exposing this conspiracy, while illegal, were necessary. Therefore, I am issuing a full pardon for any crimes committed in the course of this investigation." Alistair felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief. Not yet. But something close. "Thank you, Your Majesty." The king stood. "The council will reconvene in 1 month to appoint new members. Until then, I will personally oversee all matters of state. This corruption ends today."
The gavel fell. The room exploded in applause again. People stood, cheering, shouting Alistair's name. He walked out of the chamber in a daze. Outside, the crowd was waiting. They surged forward, calling his name, reaching for him. Not in anger, in gratitude. Lyra was there, waiting at the edge of the crowd. She smiled when she saw him. "You did it," she said. "We did it," Alistair corrected. Pharaoh appeared, looking dazed but relieved. "I can't believe that just happened." "Neither can I," Alistair admitted. They stood there for a moment, the three of them, watching the crowd celebrate. For the first time in months, Alistair felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. But even as the cheers echoed around him, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. The fight had just begun. The cheers faded as Alistair walked away from the council building. The crowd parted for him, hands reaching out to touch his sleeve, his shoulder, as if proximity to him might transfer some of his vindication to them. He moved through it all like a ghost, his mind elsewhere. Lyra kept pace beside him. Pharaoh trailed behind, still looking shell-shocked. They didn't speak until they reached the townhouse. Once inside, the door locked, the three of them stood in silence. "What now?" Pharaoh finally asked. Alistair sank into a chair. "I don't know. You just got a royal pardon. The king himself cleared your name. You should be celebrating." "Should I?" Alistair looked at him. 3 council members are in custody. Cedric's network is exposed, but how many others are still out there? How many people looked the other way while the kingdom bled? And what happens when the next Cedric comes along?" Pharaoh had no answer. Lyra leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You can't fix everything, Alistair. You did what you could. That has to be enough." "Does it?" "It has to be," she said, "because if it's not, you'll burn yourself out trying." He knew she was right, but that didn't make it easier. The next few weeks passed in a blur. The trials began almost immediately. Ashford, Greaves, and Renwick were paraded before the court, their crimes laid bare for the kingdom to see. The evidence was overwhelming. The ledger, the testimonies, the bank records. They had no defense. Ashford remained defiant to the end, insisting she'd acted in the kingdom's best interest. Greaves broke down on the stand, weeping and begging for mercy. Renwick said nothing at all, his face a mask of stone. The verdicts came down swift and final. Guilty on all counts, stripped of titles, stripped of wealth, sentenced to life imprisonment. The kingdom exhaled, but Alistair felt no satisfaction. He attended the trials, sat in the gallery, and watched justice unfold. But it felt hollow. The people who died in the war, the soldiers, the merchants, the refugees, none of them would come back. The money stolen, the lives ruined, the trust shattered, none of it could be repaired. And Alistair had to live with the knowledge that he'd been a pawn in it all, that his name, his reputation, had been used to cover crimes he hadn't committed. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. One evening, 3 weeks after the verdicts, a knock came at the door. Alistair answered it to find a royal courier standing there, holding another sealed letter. "For Duke Vane," the courier said. Alistair took it. The seal bore the king's mark again. He broke it open and read. The king was requesting his presence, privately, at the palace, tomorrow. Alistair looked up. "Tell His Majesty I'll be there." The courier nodded and left. Lyra appeared in the doorway. "What is it?" Alistair handed her the letter. She scanned it quickly. "The king wants to see you, alone." "Looks like it." "You think it's trouble?" "I don't know." Pharaoh emerged from the study, a cup of tea in hand. "More trouble? I thought we were done with trouble." "We're never done with trouble," Lyra said. Pharaoh groaned. The next day, Alistair dressed in his formal uniform, the one with the Vane crest. It felt strange wearing it again, like putting on a costume from a past life. He arrived at the palace just before noon. The guards recognized him and waved him through without question. A steward met him inside and led him down a series of corridors to a private study. The king was waiting. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the city. When Alistair entered, he turned. "Duke Vane, thank you for coming." Alistair bowed. "Your Majesty." The king gestured to a chair. "Sit, please." Alistair sat. The king poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Alistair. "I wanted to speak with you personally, away from the council, away from the court."
About what, Your Majesty? The king took a sip of wine. About what comes next? Alistair waited. The council is in shambles, the king said. 3 of its members are in prison. The rest are paralyzed by infighting and fear. The kingdom is watching, waiting to see if we can rebuild. And I need people I can trust to help me do that. Alistair set his glass down. You want me to join the council? I want you to lead it. The words hung in the air. Alistair stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Your Majesty, I just broke into a council member's home. I stole evidence. I went to the press instead of the authorities. Half the nobility thinks I'm a criminal. And the other half thinks you're a hero, the king said. More importantly, the people think you're a hero. They trust you. And right now, trust is the rarest commodity in this kingdom. Alistair shook his head. I'm not a politician. I'm a soldier. You're more than that. You've proven it. The king leaned forward. I need someone who won't compromise, someone who won't look the other way when corruption takes root, someone who will fight for what's right, even when it's hard. That's you, Alistair. You barely know me. I know enough, and I know that if you walk away now, you'll regret it, because you're not the kind of man who can stand on the sidelines while the world burns. Alistair looked down at his hands. They were calloused, scarred from years of war. He'd spent most of his life following orders, fighting battles someone else had chosen, and now the king was asking him to choose his own. I need time to think, Alistair said. The king nodded. Take all the time you need, but don't take too long. The kingdom won't wait. Alistair left the palace in a daze. The offer echoed in his head. Lead the council, rebuild the system, fix the broken parts. It was everything he'd fought against, everything he'd sworn to leave behind. And yet, he returned to the townhouse. Lyra was waiting, along with Pharaoh. Well? She asked. Alistair told them. Pharaoh's eyes widened. The king wants you to lead the council? That's incredible. It's insane, Alistair said. It's both, Lyra said. But it's also an opportunity. You could actually change things. Make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else. Or I could become the very thing I hate, Alistair said. Another politician, another cog in the machine. Not if you don't let yourself, Lyra said. You're not Ashford. You're not Cedric. You know the difference between right and wrong, and you've proven you're willing to fight for it. She's right, Pharaoh said. If anyone can do this, it's you. Alistair looked at them both. And if I fail? Then you fail, Lyra said. But at least you tried. He thought about that. About trying. About fighting. About all the people who hadn't had a choice. I'll do it, he said. Lyra smiled. Good. Pharaoh raised his teacup. To Duke Vane, future council leader, may you not completely ruin everything. Alistair almost laughed. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Always. The announcement came a week later. The king formally appointed Alistair as the new head of the High Council. The reaction was immediate and mixed. Some praised the decision. Others condemned it. The nobility was split. The people, for the most part, cheered. Alistair moved into the council chambers the following Monday. The space felt too large, too formal, but he made it his own. He stripped out the ornate furniture, replaced it with functional pieces. He opened the windows, let in the light, and he got to work. The first order of business was reform. He pushed through legislation that required all council members to disclose their financial holdings. He established an independent auditing office to review government contracts. He created a whistleblower protection program so people could report corruption without fear of retaliation. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, and it pissed off a lot of people, but it was necessary. Lyra became his unofficial advisor. She didn't have a title, didn't want one, but she was there whenever he needed her, reviewing documents, investigating leads, keeping him honest. Pharaoh went back to his practice, but he stayed in touch. Occasionally, he'd stop by with a case that needed Alistair's attention, some injustice that had slipped through the cracks. And slowly, things started to change. The kingdom didn't transform overnight. Corruption didn't vanish. There were still people who gamed the system, who cut corners, who put profit over principle. But they were fewer now, and they knew someone was watching. 6 months into his tenure, Alistair received a letter. It was from Edmund Trask, the accountant who testified against Cedric. Trask had left the capital after the trial, moved to a small town in the north. He was working as a clerk now, living quietly. But he'd written to thank Alistair, to say that stepping forward had been the hardest thing he'd ever done, and the best. Alistair read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't much, just a letter, just words. But it mattered. One evening, nearly a year after the trial, Alistair stood on the balcony of the council building, looking out over the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Lyra joined him. She handed him a glass of wine. "Rough day? Aren't they all?" She smiled. "You've done good work, Alistair. You know that, right?" "I know I've tried." "That's all anyone can do." They stood in silence for a while, watching the city settle into night. "Do you regret it?" Lyra asked. "Taking the job?" Alistair considered. "Sometimes, when the fights get ugly, when I realize how much I can't fix." He paused. "But then I think about what would have happened if I'd said no, if I'd walked away. And I know I'd regret that more." Lyra nodded. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice." "You do?" "Yeah, you're not perfect. You make mistakes. You piss people off. But you give a damn. And that's more than most people in power can say." Alistair looked at her. "You staying?" "For now," she said. "Someone's got to keep you from doing something stupid." "Appreciated." She clinked her glass against his. "To not doing something stupid." "I'll drink to that." Months turned into years. The council stabilized. The reforms took hold. The kingdom didn't become perfect. It never would. But it became better, fairer, more transparent. Alistair's reputation shifted. He was no longer the disgraced war hero or the controversial reformer. He was just Alistair Vane, the man who'd fought for justice when no one else would. And that was enough. One afternoon, he received word that Cedric Halvorn had died in prison. Heart failure, the report said. Alistair felt nothing when he heard. No relief, no satisfaction, just a quiet acknowledgement that a chapter had closed. He attended the funeral, not out of respect, but because it felt necessary, to witness the end, to see it through. Only a handful of people showed up. No family, no friends, just a priest and a few guards. Alistair stood at the back and watched as they lowered the coffin into the ground. Afterward, as he walked away, he felt lighter. Like a weight he'd been carrying for years had finally lifted. He returned to the council building. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't mind. Years passed. Alistair grew older. His hair grayed. Lines etched themselves deeper into his face. But he stayed. He kept working, kept fighting. Lyra remained by his side. She never married, never settled down. She said she didn't need to. She had her work. She had her purpose. Pharaoh retired eventually, passing his practice to a younger partner. He spent his days gardening and writing letters to Alistair, full of unsolicited advice and terrible jokes. And the kingdom moved forward. One evening, nearly 5 years after he'd taken the position, Alistair stood in the council chamber, addressing a group of new appointees. Young men and women, fresh-faced and eager, ready to change the world. He looked at them and saw himself years ago, full of idealism, full of hope. "The work you're about to do isn't easy," he said. "You'll make enemies. You'll make mistakes. You'll question whether any of it matters. But I'm here to tell you it does. Every law you pass, every injustice you prevent, every person you help, it matters. Not because it fixes everything, but because it makes things a little better. And sometimes that's all we can do." They listened intently, hanging on every word. "Don't compromise your principles," he continued. "Don't look the other way. And don't ever let anyone tell you that corruption is just the way things are. Because it's not. It's a choice. And you get to choose differently." He paused. "I didn't always believe that. For a long time I thought the system was broken beyond repair, that the powerful would always win. But I was wrong. Because the system isn't some abstract thing. It's people. And people can change. They can fight. They can win." He looked around the room. "So fight. And when it gets hard, and it will, remember why you started. Remember the people who can't fight for themselves. And keep going." The room erupted in applause. Alistair stepped down from the podium. Lyra was waiting at the back, smiling. "Good speech," she said. You think? Yeah. Almost made me believe you. He laughed. Almost? I've known you too long to be fully convinced. They walked out together into the evening air. The city sprawled below them, alive and chaotic and beautiful. You ever think about what you would have done? Lyra asked. If the trial had gone the other way? Alistair was quiet for a moment. I don't know. Probably disappeared. Started over somewhere. No one knew my name. You think you could have done that? Just walked away? No, he admitted. I don't think I could have. Lyra smiled. That's what I thought. They reached the edge of the plaza. People passed by, some recognizing Alistair, others not. A few nodded in greeting. A few stopped to thank him. He accepted it all with quiet grace. You ever regret it? Lyra asked. Everything that happened? Alistair thought about the trial, the betrayal, the months of hell, the nights he'd spent wondering if it was all worth it. No, he said, I don't regret it, because it led me here. And this, he gestured around them. This is where I'm supposed to be. Lyra nodded. Yeah, I think so too. They stood there for a while watching the sun dip below the horizon. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, Alistair felt at peace. Not because everything was fixed, not because the fight was over, but because he'd found something he'd lost along the way. Purpose. He'd been a soldier once, a war hero, a man defined by his titles and his deeds. But now he was something more. He was someone who'd fought not just for survival, but for change. Someone who'd refused to let the powerful go unchecked. Someone who'd taken a broken system and tried to make it better. He wasn't perfect. He'd made mistakes. He'd hurt people. He'd failed more times than he'd succeeded. But he'd tried. And that mattered. As the last light faded from the sky, Alistair turned to Lyra. You hungry? Starving. There's a place near the docks. Good food. Cheap wine. Sounds perfect. They walked down the steps and into the city, two people who'd survived hell and come out the other side. The kingdom would keep turning. New threats would emerge. New battles would be fought. But for tonight, they could rest. And tomorrow, they'd start again. Because that's what you did. You kept going. You kept fighting. You kept believing that things could be better, and sometimes, just sometimes, they were. Alistair Vane had survived war, betrayal, and bloodshed. He'd been dragged through the mud, stripped of his name, and nearly destroyed. But he'd risen from it. Not as a war hero, not as a duke, but as something far more dangerous. A man with nothing left to lose, and everything left to fight for.